I suppose we'll just start with the episodes now,
Mhm.
because this what I'm going to say does actually relate to the first episode and very early on. So and then there was 10.
Mhm.
Obviously, one of my notes is it starts like Star Wars. That's one thing I immediately noticed, because you have two ships chasing each other and going past the camera, and like one's much larger than the one it's chasing. So it's like got a very Star Wars vibe there at the very beginning. And of course, you immediately start with the villain and his overall motivation. And I don't know if the name of the villain was ever mentioned throughout the episodes that you've watched.
If it
I,
was, I didn't catch it.
I don't think it was mentioned right at the very beginning, but the character's name is Vilgax,
Mhm.
and he's very obviously just a pure evil villain. Although I don't really mind that as like an overarching villain of the season, because I tend to view Furial villains as being very bigger and larger than life and like very theatrical. So him being the overarching villain of the whole season kind of fits with that.
Yeah.
And I've also got, like, obviously the very first thing we see Ben do is right after we see Vilgax. Vilgax is very like serious and very determined. So we immediately cut to Ben, who is not quite as serious, like very, I don't want to say laid back, but he's obviously not the same personality as Vilgax. He's actually very opposite to Vilgax in terms of personality, which I think is a very good setup right at the beginning. And it's obviously he's displaying like very trickster like personality, because like making a paper airplane and then throwing it at his teacher's head,
Yeah.
and then pretending like he didn't do that when the teacher turned around.
Which is very 10-year-old boy, right?
Yeah.
In fact, in a later episode, he makes a comment to his cousin. You don't understand the rules of being a kid. You deny everything.
Yeah. One thing that I've noticed is the most expansive notes that I have made are all in the first episode. So, okay, what else was there? And obviously, right after we see him as a trickster, or see him do, like, display some kind of trickster type personality, the very next thing we see Ben do, after he's actually left school and effectively started his summer vacation, is we see him help out a kid who's being bullied by like these two other kids, which is actually very real to life, because I know there are times when people will be bullied, and if they can stand up for themselves, they will.
Yeah.
I also like the fact that even though Ben like stands up to them, he still ends up getting his ass kicked with the
Pretty
kid,
realistic. Yeah.
because I know not always when kids like stand up to bullies doesn't always work out for them. It kind of goes with the whole idea of not everyone will just lie back and take when someone's bullying them.
Right.
And of course, we then get Ben is then, well, then the audience is introduced to his cousin Gwen, and their like kind of rivalry type relationship, which is also very like. Actually, it's more accurate to siblings rather
I
than
was
cousins.
thinking that too. I did tend to forget that they weren't siblings. In fact, when you first see her, you're as you're seeing the characters introduced, it takes a little while to find out who they are and what their relationship is. So like when he comes into the RV and he's like, "What's she doing here?" I
Yeah.
immediately thought sister, and then it requires the explanation that comes up, your cousin, da 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 da. I also caught the fact that because their grandfather is tends to be a little bit formal, at least in the first episode or two, referring to him as Benjamin and her as Gwendolyn. But then you realize, yeah, their nicknames are Ben and Gwen. They rhyme.
Yeah. There's one small detail I noticed I don't fully understand is both Ben and Gwen have very like vibrant green eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and Grandpa Max doesn't have that. It's like I don't know if that was just a design decision or if there was any further reason behind that. We
Hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
and then we also get Grandpa Max with his like very strange food. And I like
Yeah.
the fact that this isn't necessarily like him trying to make himself seem more unusual or cover up anything, but rather it is just a part of his personality. He just likes very strange food.
And he is, at least the premise for it is, he is attempting to get his grandchildren to try new things, to experience, get out of their comfort zone,
Yeah,
with these foods, this camping trip that they're going on, and so forth, which does two things as the story goes. First, it primes the kids for the crazy things that are going to happen to them with this alien MacGuffin and the adventure and whatnot. Also
yeah,
demonstrates that he's going to be open to dealing with you know some really bizarre circumstances in a way that you wouldn't expect most adults to be able to handle it.
yeah. And that does also go into some of the behind the well, not behind the scenes, but like some like unknown information about Grandpa Max that we don't know immediately. Although over the course of the season, we do get multiple hints that Grandpa Max might know more than he appears, or might know more than he's like letting on.
Uh-huh.
Because when Ben like storms off into the forest, and then the Omnitrix in its pod like crash lands down to, or it starts coming down, and when he spots it, it then suddenly turns and like flies right at him.
Yeah.
Which is there is a reason it does that, but that
Sort
won't
of
be
it
explained until later seasons.
sort of the whole Hal Jordan kind of thing. The MacGuffin chooses the
Yeah,
hero, and boom. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was thinking was when I was watching. It's like very green, similar to Green Lantern's origin in a way.
And kind of alluding back to the connection between him and his cousin, um the fact their names rhyme and so on and so forth. I totally could imagine, and I thought this as the series was going, I could totally see an alternate reality where Gwen was the one that found the thing and it became Gwen 10.
You're not far off with that. I don't want to spoil anything, but you're not far off with that kind of assumption.
I mean, I almost feel like as the story was going, there was without jumping too far ahead, there's a bit where they do encounter a heroic alien that kind of gives him some advice and whatnot, and I almost expected him to give her some sort of a doodah that would give her powers too, so that you know they could be partners or something like that. That didn't quite happen, but I was like, yeah, I could see that happening at some point.
Yeah, I mean, even though Gwen doesn't get any powers, we still see that both her and Grandpa Max can still be useful.
Oh,
Even though,
absolutely. I mean, there are times that she, actually saves Ben's bacon, without any powers.
one thing that I like is after Ben the Omnitrix then like attaches itself to his wrist, and like he's trying to get it off, but it's just not coming off.
Right.
And then he like first figures out that it like that it does actually do something,
Mm-hmm.
because the faceplate like he's like messing with it, and then the faceplate extends out, and we see a small image of the different aliens that you can turn into.
Right.
And then he transforms into one of the aliens, Although this is more due to the fact that I've watched the show multiple times before, but the alien is called Heat Blast. It was like a fiery alien.
Right.
I don't know why, but in the first episode, they never directly name the aliens. It's not until later on that we actually hear the different aliens' names,
And those
or the
are
names he's
names.
giving them.
I was just going to say those are names that Ben gives them. He's not, it's not like they come pre-named or something like that.
No, yeah, that is Ben giving them those names, or the specific names. In fact, there are some inner workings of the Omnitrix itself.
Mm-hmm.
There are some details that aren't really filled in until later. Like the Omnitrix contains the DNA of, I think, like thousands of aliens all over the universe.
Huh.
So, obviously, we don't. Obviously, for the first season, we only get 10 aliens. And in later seasons, Ben doesn't unlock more aliens. And also gets new aliens that don't have DNA in the Omnitrix. But that's not until like a lot later. But for now, and there's also the like unusual like quirks of the way the Omnitrix works for this like first season. Like the multiple times that Ben chooses one alien and then turns into a different alien.
Yeah, I caught that.
Now, I think I have a possible reason why it does that. That is kind of relying on later information that comes up later.
Then let me speculate first, since I don't have any a priori knowledge.
Yeah.
My impression just from the episodes that I saw was, I mean, he says himself, it's like it's got a mind of its own. I'm guessing that there might be some sort of artificial intelligence in this, Omni thing.
Yeah, Omnitrix.
Omnitrix.
Well, one of the latest shows does have like an AI in the Omnitrix. In fact, I believe one of the latest shows mentions the Omnitrix having a very sophisticated AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that when he first transforms into Heat Blast, because it's the first time it's happening, he like initially starts freaking out because he's on fire.
I'm on fire. I'm on fire.
and then as soon as he realizes that actually he's not like being hurt by it, he's basically immune to the fire.
Yeah.
Then he gets a little cocky, starts throwing fireballs, and accidentally starts a forest fire.
Right.
And I like the fact that when Gwen and Grandpa Max notice it, they're like, maybe it's just some fool messing with something he doesn't understand. Then they like immediately go Ben and then run to the forest.
And yeah, that's very telling, because first, it's very perceptive. It is literally what is happening. And it also points out, yep, they know Ben, so there you go.
Yeah. And then we get Gwen's the first one to run to Ben as Heat Blast, and obviously she doesn't recognize him. Although I like the fact that she recognizes him through the fact that he's talking the same way that he was earlier in the episode.
Not in the same voice, but the language he uses and his attitude towards her, she picks up on.
Yeah. I do find it funny that like he explains how the Omnitrix got on him, where it came from, or the amount of information that he has. And then when Grandpa Max comes up, he literally was about to start repeat that whole thing again.
Exactly.
And then Gwen's like, hey, we have more important things to deal with now.
In a very 10-year-old way, telling the whole narrative, all in one breath, sometimes unnecessary details.
Yeah. And I do like the fact that Grandpa Max, without question, immediately comes up with like a solution to the problem.
Right, because he probably came to the situation with some of these, he didn't know he was coming to find his grandson, transmorphed into an alien, but he did know he was running into a forest fire. So he was already coming with the basic, what do we do, going on in his head. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, he's like, well, we gotta do a backfire,
Yeah. And then after they solve that problem, they then don't really know how the Omnitrix works, so they're basically sitting around a campfire with Benner's heat blast, trying to like figure out what to do. And I do like the fact that Gwen's like first she says, "Are you going to stay a monster forever?" And Grandpa Max is immediately like, "He's not a monster, he's an alien." And they like look at him. He's like, "Oh, well, look at him. What else could he be?"
Yeah.
It's like very telling that he knows more than he's like making them think.
Well, and see, from I saw that too, but I also, from their point of view, took it as, well, he's got a very mature analysis of this thing. First off, this is still Ben. He is not a monster. That's
Yeah.
established. It came from space. He's an alien,
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there also seems to be, I mean, I didn't know if I was projecting too much onto it. I didn't know how sophisticated this storyline, this, the writing and the backstory are. I didn't know if, like, there's an implication that he actually is an alien, his, even before he obtains this object, does Grandpa know that he is an alien and we just have no way of knowing that, like, kind of like a Peter Quill type of thing.
Yeah. Well, I know that a lot of like details relating to Grandpa Max and like what he's done before and like what his prior job was and like a few other things do get revealed in the final episode, and then the first episode of season 2 does like delve a little more into it and give a little more of an explanation of what
Gotcha.
of all of that.
Yeah, and one other thing that I got from this, especially this first episode, that you might not have, just because I'm an old fart, but there was back in the 70s, during the live action superhero craze, there was Filmation did a live action Captain Marvel, and by Captain Marvel I mean it was called Shazam.
Okay, the original Captain Marvel.
Yes, exactly. And it was, how they tend to change things a little bit when they move to TV and whatnot. It was Billy Batson as a child, basically the origin story, but and they never show the origin, they just do it in the opening credits every week, explaining how he got his powers, but we never actually see the origin story. And you're coming en medias res. He's traveling around with his mentor. He's not even given a name. We have no idea what the connection is, if it's a grandfather, an uncle, some old man that took him in, who knows. He just refers to him as mentor. And they're traveling around in a Winnebago, having adventures with him as a kid turning into a superhero. And I saw that as identical to this, with the addition of, the female cousin, that, adds a dimension to it,
Yeah. No, I didn't actually think of that. I've not actually watched that old show, that old Shazam / Captain Marvel show.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily recommending it. I mean, it's the kind of thing that I have very fond memories of, but I have very fond memories of it because of watching it as a 10-year-old and having the Mego action figures and imagining that it was the same Captain Marvel and so forth. But you know, it was the kind of thing that when I'd go back and watch it as an adult, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty simplistic. You know, it's not
Yeah,
something that, you know, my friends would get into now if they didn't when they were kids. So, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I am working on collecting some of the original Captain Marvel comics because he is one of my favorite DC heroes.
Well, in that case, I would recommend, at least for interest's sake, at least check it out. You know, even on YouTube, they've got at least clips and the opening and so forth, so you can kind of get a feel for it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
yeah. Then we also have the Vilgax sends down one of his drones to retrieve the Omnitrix, and it lands right near the near where the pod landed, and it investigates it, and then it blows up the pod. I'm assuming that would be to hide any evidence of the Omnitrix's existence to to the native population, I would imagine.
Right. And I mean, you know, whether or not you have beneficial or nefarious intentions towards the planet, you don't want your alien technology getting into their hands. You know, if you're benevolent, you don't want to affect, you know, you kind of have that prime directive concept. You don't want to mess up their society with your technology. If
Yeah,
you're a villainous character, it's like, I don't want to run the risk of them, you know, using this technology against me one day.
yeah. And I also like the drone. It then these two like smaller disc shaped drones like eject from its shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
and then those start flying around and searching for where the Omnitrix is. And I don't know if the show does this at the beginning, but I know later on that Vilgax and all his drones can track the Omnitrix when it's in use, but if it's not being used, then they have no idea where it is.
Didn't catch that, but that does make sense because again, this whole idea that uh you know, these aliens and weird things keep, you know, kind of finding Ben, you know. In fact, his cousin even points that out. You know, you just seem to attract all this kind of craziness since you found that thing.
Yeah,
And I also did, I don't know if I just missed something, but I was feeling under the impression that because the villain kept referring to it as, you know, my Omnitrix, you know, I didn't know if this was just the conceit of somebody who was trying to obtain something and just, you know, considering it his, because, you know, that's his intent, or if it was really a device he had created and it, you know, really was his. So that is not
yeah,
clear to me at this point.
yeah, yeah. We do learn somewhat by the end of the season, but we do have a more confirmational um, in, information at the later on that the Omnitrix is not a creation of Vilgax's. He just wants it.
Yeah. In fact, that's the next, I think the next thing that happens is he meets a heroic alien who, you know, gives him a little bit more information, not a great deal. And
Yeah,
it still doesn't clear that up, but it does seem to imply that, yeah, this is not something that should fall into his hands. It doesn't really belong to him. You need to hold on to it.
yeah. And I also like the while like Ben and Gwen are just by the camp, and Grandpa Max has gone off to like investigate the crash site, and we get more hints of Grandpa Max's past, or to some extent. We like Ben is immediately like messing with the watch again, even though Grandpa Max told him not to, and he
Right.
like transforms into a big orange wolf dog thing,
Yep.
which is called Wild Mutt, and it doesn't have eyes like on the front of its head, but rather it has these like I don't know if you'll call them like gills, like a shark, or just like these like slits on the side of his neck
Hmm.
that allow him to see through like his sense of smell. And I also like the fact that Gwen's like, as soon as he transforms into that, she's like, this game's no good, it can't see. And then she immediately attempts to like hit him from behind because she thinks he can't actually see her. And then like when she swings at him, he like jumps into the air and she falls on the floor.
Yep.
And then he just like runs off into the forest. And then obviously encounters the disc drones. And then like after he destroys one of them, and then another one is like about to like get him when he's transformed back. Then we see Gwen come in and then start smashing the droid with a shovel. And then and once again we see Gwen being useful without powers.
Right. Exactly. Like I said, kind of coming to his aid without powers. This also establishes a motif that I saw recurring in these first episodes of he's using his powers in either a selfish or frivolous way, but because there's an immediate actual need for those powers even while he's in that form, it almost justifies him. It's like, well, yeah, I know I initiated this change for selfish reasons, but then this guy showed up, so
Yeah. And then obviously after those drones are destroyed, we do get like instances of Ben like actively trying to be a hero, or at least like wanting to be like that. Although we do later learn that Ben has actually like been inspired by like superhero TV shows when he
Sure.
was like younger.
Sure.
So it's like it's not completely out of nowhere, but we won't learn that until later.
And I do love the recurring motif of him, when he's caught a bad guy or whatever, and he's dealing with, the aftermath. No need to thank me. It's like, yeah. That's a very 10-year-old pretending to be a superhero kind of attitude. Yeah.
And I also like that when Ben, Gwen, and Grandpa Max are all like sitting in the RV after those drones attacked him, Grandpa Max does actually like he's like stern with him. He's like, "I told you not to mess with this thing. We don't know what it is."
Mm-hmm.
He's like being stern with him, but then he also like once that moment's passed, then he like starts encouraging Ben to actually like be better and be more heroic. 'Cause he's like we need to teach you how to use this. And like I like that Ben's like he's like looking down when Grandpa Max is being
Mm-hmm.
like stern with him, but then when Grandpa Max like starts encouraging him, and then he jumps to his feet, and he's got like a happy look on his face and everything.
Yeah, because it's not just no, you can't leave it alone. It's no, you can't, but there is a way of redirecting his natural inclinations. I'm a big believer that's really how you deal with not just children, just people in general, because it's just human nature and you cannot fight it. You tell someone no, you can't do it, that's not going to work. You got to find a positive outlet for whatever the inclination is. This is why I hate what schools try to do. Boys need to learn to just sit and listen, and you got to break that. They're now calling it toxic masculinity. No. You channel that, you give them recess and gym class, and and then you break up the long stretches where they get bored. There's a positive way to deal with that. So that's very much what I'm seeing here. And again, it's the wisdom of the grandfather, right?
Yeah, and also the more you tell someone they can't do something, the more they then want to do
Want
that
to.
thing.
Yeah.
And then obviously we then have, now that the small disc drones have been destroyed, now the bigger drone that sent them starts attacking like a park or like some kind of like car park with all other trucks and cars and like all other people there. And then Ben well, for the first instance of convenient radio telling the protagonist what's happening. That happens multiple times. But they then decide to then go and help. And Ben turns into the third alien, which is Diamond Head, which I will point out is kind of misleading because he's not actually made of diamond. He's made of an alien material. Although we don't learn the name of that material until a lot later. So I suppose we don't have to worry about that right now. And I do like the fight scene between Diamond Head and the larger robot. We do get some like we don't just have Ben fight it and then win. He does actually like get thrown around a few times. What did you think of the overall like the final fight in the episode?
I liked the fact that, and it's not just here, but I do see it progressing as we go through the season. This idea of him being completely lost on what his abilities are, sometimes misusing the power, because what he imagines he is able to do and what he is actually able to do may not always line up. But there is definitely this idea that between the abilities of the Omnitrix and just his spirit, and willingness, tends to work out. So
Yeah,
it's like it's a good fit.
yeah, and also we learned that Ben's not as dumb, I suppose would say. He's not like a genius, but he's by no means an idiot. He does
Right.
actually know what he's doing.
He's clever and he can learn.
Yeah, because we get that moment where the drone or the droid blasts him, and like it like reflects off of him because of his because of the material that the diamond is made of. It's very reflective, and he takes note of that. And then he taunts the robot to like actually fire a beam like at him intentionally, and then he uses his hands to redirect that beam back at the robot.
Yeah, I did catch that. Yeah.
And then after he's defeated the robot, and then quickly runs away before he turns back, we then get the final part of the episode where it cuts to I assume the next morning, where he has transformed into another one of the aliens called Accelerate, who has super speed, and he's ran home, collects some things, and then run back again. And then he speeds around the RV and puts everything back in, and then transforms back, and then obviously the episode ends there with a little bit of mystery of what's to come, and also obviously the summer vacation is not turning out the way that he initially expected it to. I also really like the transformation sequences when he turns into an alien. Although sometimes it doesn't actually show the transformation, sometimes it just shows a flash and then he's that particular alien.
Right, because when it does show the transformation, sometimes I get the impression that it looks painful, I gotta say.
Yeah. Well, it'd be like something like heat blast with you see what look like molten bits of rock going over his arm and then up his arm to his face.
Yeah. Or like the bulging vein,
Oh yeah, for like
effect. It's like,
wild
ooh,
mutt.
yeah.
Probably the least painful with diamond heads transformation because it's just like a diamond or that kind of
Which
material
seems
kind of
to just
growing
cover his
over.
body. Although,
Yeah.
if you really think about it enough, it's got to be more than that. It's not just covering his body; it's literally transforming his body.
Yeah. I suppose along the lines of like say a werewolf transformation, because I know that tends to be depicted in well, I mean most werewolf movies are horror movies, so obviously it's going to be like depicted in a negative way.
Sure.
Also something like that, like cracking bones and then extending and then fur growing out and claws projecting out of your fingers and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you definitely, in fact, at one point I thought he was turning into a werewolf, but that's when he turns into the dog alien.
Oh yeah, because you have the orange fur growing
and the teeth, and
oh yeah, and the claws in this very like squarish or rectangulish looking claws.
Mm-hmm.
No. Although a later season does have aliens that definitely pay respects to the Universal monster movies.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's like Frankenstein's monster, the Mummy, the Wolfman.
Interesting.
I think it's just those three. But that obviously that's a later season, so we don't really need to go into too much detail on that.